Tuned into the Monica Brant Show, and I am your host, Monica Brant. I'm so thankful you are here today. We have a very special co-host tonight with my beautiful friend and IFBB superstar, Wendy Fortino. Where is Wendy? There she is. Hi, beautiful. So, Wendy, thanks for joining me. And as always, you know, I love having you on the Monica Brant Show.
How are you today? I'm on here. I love it.
Thank you. You look great, girl.
So do you.
As always. Thank you. Thank you.
It's nice break. The weather's terrible outside, so this is a nice brightening of my day.
So you're in Southern California and the weather's terrible. I mean, usually you hear about those, you know, California days and, you know, so it's one of those rainy days, huh?
Yeah, it's very rare, but yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I lived out there for 10 years and I remember some of those big storms that would come through and it was so awkward because you're like, it's not supposed to be raining here.
You walk outside with shorts and a tank top, you're like having like this confusion. Like, wait, hang on. This isn't making sense.
This is not what I signed up for in California. So Wendy, a few months ago, I asked you about some special guests that you thought would be a great fit for the Monica Brant Show, knowing kind of where my heart is about their industry and showcasing other celebrities in the industry, other people that have helped make the industry what it is, the legendary athletes, nutrition gurus, and just the overall superstars of our industry. And so you brought to mind Chris Cook, who is our guest here. And I'm so excited to introduce him. So he is a military vet, which I did not know. And I have a heart for military. He's a retired IFBB professional bodybuilder, creator and founder of 𝗬𝗎cie Life Boost, which we're going to find out all about. He holds a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I didn't know that. He's a God-loving and God-fearing husband and father of 4, I think, girls, right?
Yes.
I don't know how he has time for anything, especially having time to come on here, but I'm so thankful that he is. So let's see you, Chris.
There you are. Thanks for having me on.
So excited to just get to know you more. I know I was trying to remember the last time I saw you, and I don't know, was it at the gym or at a bodybuilding show, the Olympia or something? Because I know we'd run, you know, into each other, and I'd always see it. I actually can picture, you know, your big, awesome smile and just being around you. And it was always a pleasant, you know, interaction when I saw you. So it's kind of crazy that I can't remember how long it's been, but welcome and thanks for joining us here at the Monica.
Yeah, no, it has been a long time. It's funny because in the industry, you get so used to being around each other in all these different situations. I certainly remember the first, though. The first was a good story if you remember. I don't know if you remember or not, but we did one of the magazine shoots for Max Muscle, the magazine. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. What do you remember what year that was?
Ooh, it would have had to have been 2000 and
Monica has like 100 covers. She's like, I'm trying to remember which cover.
Yeah, 2001 it would have been.
Yeah. 2001. Okay. Yeah, so that was actually before I started figure. It was in between my fitness figure kind of. There was a couple of years there where I didn't compete.
That's right. You had already carved the way in fitness, and you know, I'm sure beginning to set the plan to carve the way in figure.
Well, thank you. Oh, stop! Awesome. Oh, so fun. So Max Muscle. There was a good group of people there and a great company. And we had some really cool brands. Do you remember Perfetto as well? Not to change the subject, but remember the brand Perfetto?
Of course, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I used to
love Perfetto. Like nutrition?
No, it was clothing. And Wendy, they were beyond. They were ahead of time in the clothing and the quality and the fit and the wear. Yeah. Like they were ahead of their time.
What happened?
They had a location right there in Venice. So I would go probably maybe 3 or 4 times a year. They'd let me come in and gather a handful of new clothing and sponsor me with clothes. That was really nice stuff. And I want to say to today, I still have some of their pieces that still look good. Like their quality is held up all this time.
What happened to them is what I want to know.
I don't know exactly. Chris, do you know? Like I'm assuming just, evolution of time and new, companies coming in and just, it's one of those things. But
yeah, look, it's a tough industry, right? Very niche industry. I mean, amazing clothing. I mean, it's interesting. I got a little bit into the clothing business for a very short period of time while I was in the industry, and discovered that little niche of fitness, at least at the time, was just, it was too small really to scale a business. So I would imagine that's probably along the lines of what had happened, but you're right. The quality of their stuff. In fact, I think my wife still has some of their stuff herself. Like once you find those brands, like you never go to anything else, right? It's like your go-to.
Wow. Well, that's what we were talking about with social media. It's like, I have a hard time embracing social media, and I've talked about it with both of you, but it seems like that's kind of like the marketing strategy of most clothing brands.
Yeah. The market, the industry is just flooded with so many, but we had very specifics. And I remember when I first started, Chris, do you remember Hot Skins?
Oh, of course.
Right. And I remember coming out to California in 95, and I started modeling for them right away and going on. I remember they brought a group of us to the Bahamas for a photo shoot. And I used to go in, I knew the owner, Trish, with the red, crazy, long red hair. And she always dressed like real different, uniquely. And she was just this unique fashion designer. I remember going out to her house one time too, and she had horses in Malibu, and so she invited me out to her house, and very unique home, and just some of those good old days where there was very specific clothing lines and supplement lines that were very big in the industry and all exclusive to that area of LA.
Yeah, those. It's funny because it's how influential those companies are because they were at the beginning of our careers, right? Yeah. And it kind of set the tone for how we dressed and what we thought looked good. It's funny because all the way through my career, I would hold on to those early styles, man. And people would just bag on me all the time. If you guys remember, the striped singlet.
I was just about to say that.
Like when I was getting into a show, like the first time I saw one is when Dennis Newman had one on, and after he won the USA, and I was like, dude, that's the perfect, because it just like it shaped your body and made you just so pleased. It was so great. I think I
want to say that. Can you see my cover here?
Yeah.
Chris is like bleach blonde, spiked hair, and the striped yellow and black suspenders. That's like
that Dennis behind you there.
That's my first cover with Dennis Newman, and I'm thinking he might have had one of those on in this picture.
Oh yeah, I mean it was famous. He had just won. What year is that?
That's 94. He just won the USA.
I mean that guy was on top of the world.
Right. And my first cover, I had nobody. I was just like this girl from Texas. I got to shoot with him out of the blue, Ralph DeHaan. And I won't go into all that story, Chris, because it's super fun, old story. But I think he had one of those on. And the stripes. But all of the bodybuilders wore that back. Like they all wore the stripes, the hot stripes. All of them.
Well, I was still wearing it in 2004. I was 10 years later. I was still wearing it, and people would clown me. But I'm like, dude, you can say what you want. I look good right now, man.
Right. I mean, those pieces. So, Wendy, you can imagine. Where the Clown is on Main Street there in LA. It's kind of like the hot spot where
used to be Kookaroo.
Yeah.
And then the big clown on the wall outside of it used to be a powerhouse there. Like that's Main Street, right? Like that's Main Street. You would walk down maybe a couple blocks, and on the right side was Hot Skins.
Yeah.
Like that's a good brand name. That's a good name.
Yeah. And that was the main clothing line for all of the bodybuilding industry internationally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was huge. And, we could go in there, and any time of the day you go in there and different bodybuilders. I mean, people would travel from all over the world to LA to Gold's Gym and Hot Skins.
Wow.
And of course the Firehouse, restaurant, the Firehouse, and they would come and make their vacation. If they were bodybuilding fans, they would make their vacation around all of that area of LA, go to those big spots. They'd come to the gym every day. I remember there was a couple times that couples would fly in together, and they would hire me to put them through the wife through workouts and work with her on posing or whatever. And then the husband would train with Charles Glass or, whatever bodybuilder that they had chose to train with that was there at the Gold's Gym that they could train with. And there was a lot of that kind of stuff that would happen. And they would come in specifically for these kind of things like, okay, Hot Skins and, Perfetto maybe, and Max Muscle and the gym, Gold's Gym, and then Firehouse, and that's what they would spend their, and of course the beach, but that's what they would spend their time doing every day for a whole week. It's cool. I don't know if people still do that. Of course, I'm not out there.
Well, sure they do. Absolutely, they do. I mean, it's funny because we've kind of grown distant to all that activity, but it's as alive and well today as it's ever been. I mean, these youngsters come in with the same aspirations, and because you got to, there's just so much history there, right? Mm-hmm. You remember the Battle for the Olympia videos. Mm-hmm. And that would feature Lee Priest as an example, or I mean any of the guys, Chris Cormier or Flex or any of them, and then you would walk through Venice exactly as you just described, going and doing all of these things. And so it was a shoe-in. That's exactly, there you go. There he is.
Claudia's on top of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
I mean, literally, that guy right there became monumental in my focus to become a professional bodybuilder. No question about it. Because I just
he looked like Superman too,
relatively similar physique, but yeah, and Dennis that kid was on top of the world at literally the moment he turned pro. It was amazing.
Well, he was already a Weider contracted athlete when I shot with him, and he had just won the USA. So I had no idea who Dennis Newman was. Like, I just little girl from country Texas, and went out there, got to shoot with him, and ended up on a cover. It was pretty cool. But that cover was instrumental for me, building on that. But anyways, it's so fun to kind of reminisce a little bit about those days, because those were some really fun days being out there. When were you mostly out in that area, Chris?
So after I got out of the military in December of '99, I ended up driving to San Jose, California, and living there because the girlfriend I was with at the time, actually, she was in the military as well. She got a job at Cisco Systems. And so that's what brought me first to San Jose. And that's, as soon as I got to San Jose, I got acclimated and then began to show prep, and I did the Sacramento, and then I prepped for the 2000 Nationals. And in that process, I met 𝗬𝗲cie 𝗂𝗯𝗲. So this gets into a longer discussion, but my career began to take off because I won the Sacramento, at least my class in the Sacramento, and I began to get finally some work and magazine stuff going. So when 9/11 hit, and I was working in the aviation industry. So when 9/11 hit, basically my whole company got laid off. And so I just knew I needed to get to LA. So I literally packed my truck, left my girlfriend then, not the one I came from Alaska with, but my new girlfriend. Her name is Denise, who now is my wife. But I left her in San Jose and headed down to LA to give this dream of mine a shot. And lived in my car for about 6 weeks and figured out a way to get life going.
Well, I want to come back to that because those are some really big pieces there to the story, and I don't want to gloss over them, but I just kind of want to take a step back and first of all, find out, how did you grow up? Where did you grow up? What was your childhood? And what were some of the influences you had growing up? Because obviously they led you down into military and then bodybuilding. So I'd love to hear about those pieces of your life?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Colorado Springs, and I lived there until high school, until I was about 14 years old, and then I moved to Oklahoma City. I came from a kind of a broken up home. My parents divorced very early, but my focus from the time I can remember, my focus has always been athletics. And so I started, wrestling and playing football and all those things very early. And had made the determination I wanted to be a professional athlete. Certainly by the time I was 14. Due to some, home situations and whatnot, I decided to move to Oklahoma City to live with my mom. I had not lived with her since I was in 3rd grade. And so, my home would, my dad was a pretty bad alcoholic. And so it was pretty disruptive to try to, focus on things. And so my mom was like, look, man, come out here and live with me and get some stability.
Wow. So how many years had that been since you'd been with your mom?
So from like 3rd grade to 9th, so maybe 6 years. I guess it's really not that long, but when you're a child.
Yeah, but from 3rd grade to 9th grade, it feels like so long. It's a lot of development happens between those years.
Yeah, certainly influences your way of viewing life, no question about it. Yeah. But
were you an only child?
No, I've got a sister, an older sister. She's 23 months older than I am. And very similar in a lot of ways. She kind of took a little bit different path than me. Like growing up around alcohol and drugs and those kinds of things, it seems as if there's like 2 pathways for kids that grow up. You either kind of go down that same path or you go completely opposite. And that's exactly what my sister and I did. She kind of went down that party lifestyle. And for me, I really didn't, drink ever until after bodybuilding, until after I was 30 years old. Once you get to a certain age, there's just no kind of real reason to introduce that into your life. But certainly the beginning years was because everybody tells you if your dad's an alcoholic, you're going to be one as well. So I ended up in high school in Oklahoma City and graduated in 94 and didn't get the college opportunities, not because they weren't there so much as I wasn't smart enough to take advantage of the ones that were there. And so I got frustrated and basically joined the military right out of that. Yeah.
So you enlisted right out of high school?
Yeah. I took a couple of months because I wanted to go to the University of Colorado and I wanted to play football for the Buffs. And so I week after high school, I packed my truck up and I drove to Colorado. I had a cousin there. So I got to live with him and get things going. I ended up working 3 jobs. And in about 6 or 7 months or so, like every time you build up some money in your savings account, then your truck breaks down or, life happens. And I just couldn't get ahead. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to join the military and get my feet underneath me so that I can focus. I was already doing, I was working out a lot. I wasn't really bodybuilding yet, but I was in pursuit of that physique that I always wanted.
I want to ask you a really quick question because I know we have more, there are more obstacles that you've overcome. And obviously in life, we continue to overcome obstacles, but I'm just so, I'm just trying to figure this out because I want to know, would you say it's intrinsic for you to be at such a young age and have it in you to go down the right path? Because, you said there's 2 paths people can go down, and you, even though everything didn't work out the way you wanted it to and things kept coming your way, it was it seems like it was kind of always in you to overcome whatever obstacle came your way. Did you have any influences, or how did you generate that?
Well, look, I think when you grow up in a home I think this is a story that matches a lot of bodybuilders. Honestly, there's a lot of youth disruptiveness or disruption within their youth that creates this need for stability as well as like, you know, there's this fair amount of insecurity, you know, when your mom is gone and you know, I don't want to, you know, whine about it or anything.
No, I mean, you're not. You overcame it.
Hey,
Yeah,
you're talking to two girls here too, so
Yeah.
details.
It's one of these things that in my mind, I sought stability. Like I just wanted stability in life. And I knew obviously from living in a home like that, that the pathway that my sister was choosing was not that.
Yeah.
And so that for the same reason why I didn't let that lag between high school and the military take very long, because I just saw like, this is going to take a long time and I've got to figure out a way to get on my feet here. You know, I couldn't buy a bottle of creatine for goodness sakes, you know?
Right.
And so in order, and living with my cousin and uncle, you know, my uncle, it's, you know, I appreciated it, but I wanted to be on my own. And
so when so you were living with your dad, was your sister living there too?
yeah, she was with me.
That's something that's unusual to me and my maybe experience. It seems like typically kids go with their mothers. So how did that end up happening? And
yeah, it was a really nasty divorce. And ultimately what ended up happening was the judge literally gave us the choice. They said, where do you want to live? And to be truthful, my dad did a really, really good job of painting a pretty nasty picture of my mom.
Oh, man.
And, you know, and when you're that young, I had this very deep sense of loyalty to my dad. We had athletics in common, and I wanted to please him. I mean, ultimately, that's what it was. And so I stayed with him as long as I could until, you know, by the time I got to 9th grade, so the end of 9th grade. So when I went to 10th grade is when I, you know, went to Oklahoma City. That summer in between, it just had gotten so bad that, you know, I mean, we didn't have food in the house, man. I mean, it was bad. And my mom was just like, kid, come on, man, you know, like, and so I did. And it was a good decision, you know. I mean, it came with its own volatility, of course, but nonetheless, it got me out of that situation. Yeah, well, exactly. You had food.
It sounds like, you know, kids are always looking for that affirmation from their parents, right? And my understanding, you know, boys growing up are always looking for their father to approve them, to be proud of them, to admire them, or, you know, and for boys to say, my dad is proud of me. Like, I mean, I know that from my brother and my father. Just, you know, my brother's a couple years older than I am. And I remember growing up that he was always looking for that from my dad. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes that doesn't happen. And there's a drift, unfortunately, right? There's a drift. I don't think dads really understand that potentially, especially if they have an addiction like your dad did, because then he's just kind of clueless to so many things that are happening around him, and specifically with his children. Man, that's...
When you open a home like that, it forces you to be very independent, because, you know, one of the things I kind of tell my kids, right? You know, it's, you know, I wasn't asked to show my report card. You know, it wasn't, you know, my dad was off in his own little world, which gave me a lot of freedom. And so then, of course, I can give you a lot of stories as a kid of doing a lot of stuff you probably shouldn't be doing. Yeah, not that.
Boundaries, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't do things like breaking houses or things like that, but just adventurous stuff.
Well, you can't parent yourself at that age,
right? Yeah.
And there's still, I think, the underlying cry of "pay attention to me" too from a child. Like, how do I get the attention of my parents who I love, and especially those tender young years? Even a boy is going to be looking for that approval and that love that he wants from his parents specifically, whether they're present or not, or whether they're addicted, you know, have addictive personalities or not. So,
well, this is interesting. A lot of people are going to relate to your story, Chris, because so many people, you know, they're trying to choose their path, and people either become a victim or they become a victor. And I feel like it's interesting to see how people fight through these adversities, because this is unfortunately more common than we like to think it is, you know, in terms of family situations. And so just to hear the way you like clawed your way out of all this stuff when you were so young, you didn't really have a lot of direction. It really does mold and shape everything that you turned out to do and become. It seems when you hear some of the things that you've accomplished, it's like, how does a human do these things? And then when I'm hearing your story, it's like starting to come together, you know, this like kid that fought through so much. Like nothing seems impossible when you have to fight that hard at such a young age. I'm starting to cry thinking about it.
No, you're right. I mean, you know, that's why there's so much of it to be thankful for, right? Because you're, you know, the life of adversity typically pays off. Actually, you know, if you look at the majority of people, and this is becoming less and less because we're becoming such a wealthy economy, but it used to be that the pool of ultra wealthy individuals or people that come from really kind of humble beginnings, because they have this internal fire to succeed, you know, and to become something that's almost unobtainable. And, you know, not that I've achieved any level of that type of success or any, but that desire is certainly there for sure. And the willingness, I think, also is, you know, when you taste dirt and you realize it actually isn't as bad as your imagination, and your tolerance for risk, at least for me, elevates. And you're willing to throw life on red and say, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. I mean, like moving to LA and living in my car for a few weeks. And, you know, it really wasn't that big of a deal. It sounds much worse than it was, but
it wasn't that big of a deal.
Wasn't that big of a deal.
You know, I had a gym membership at Gold's. I would show up in the morning, get a good workout in and shower, and then go.
Shower, good.
Man, you are something else. Let me tell you.
Well, and then I tell you, the other blessing is I had a credit card. And I could eat at McDonald's. I ate McDonald's 5 times a day because I could eat a number 2 at McDonald's back then for less than $3. I could get 2 cheeseburgers, a lemonade, and 2 cookies, and I could do that 5 times. And from a caloric perspective, get there, and then and maintain at least. I wasn't going to be in a growth phase per se because I got to get my life organized, but at least maintain where I'm at until I get that stability, you know.
Oh my God.
So,
wow, you're amazing. That's crazy.
Good stuff. That's what Venice is made of. I mean, you know, the real story. When I was in Alaska, you heard about, there's guys that live in the back of Gold's Gym in their vans, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I slept in McDonald's parking lot. You know that McDonald's on Lincoln between Washington and Venice.
Yeah.
And I just parked in the back corner there. And to be honest, never once did I get harassed, or there was never an issue ever.
Well, not with that yellow and black stripe onesie.
That's right.
No one's gonna mess with you.
Yeah, that's right.
Your blonde hair and your muscles and your, overall outfit. Who's gonna mess with you?
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Now, as you were talking, there's a scripture that came to mind, and I don't want to go off on this tangent right now because I know I want to talk about your faith at some point too. But I was reading in Hebrews, and it talks about that Jesus went through all the suffering that he went through, taught him obedience, and it perfected him. And it was such a cool scripture. I was reading it, and I was talking to my husband. He just broke part of his hand right here on a horse with a horse yesterday. And so we were just kind of discussing this, and I was reading Hebrews today, and I was like, and it just talks about Jesus going through all the suffering that he did and all the crying out to God that he did. And, we think about him coming down, this perfect human that's, half human, half God. And how does he need to go through anything to be perfected, but he went through all the suffering that he went through, and it taught him obedience, which kind of stands out to me right now as what you've done. Like you went through a lot of suffering as a child, going through that kind of lifestyle with your dad, and then, your parents separating, and then you go into your mom, and just all of that unsure disarray, and not really knowing what to do, and not having the guidance and the boundaries, so the love, and sharing your dad with alcohol, like that's just it's not what children are supposed to be raised in, honestly. And so there's a lot of suffering there. And I know, that you're a different person now, but that's all part of your history. And it's probably, it kind of, as I'm looking at all the things you've done in your life and how you've succeeded in so many different areas. Yeah, it's like we're supposed to emulate Jesus. And so I guess my point of all that is giving you some, not credit or something, but just support, and saying that you are emulating, if that shows that your faith, and it's all lined up. You've gone through a lot of suffering. It's created obedience in you, and look what God's done with it for blessings for you, with your wife and your daughters and your successful businesses. And so I don't know, maybe I'm just a heartfelt share there, as the scriptures sometimes leap out off the page to us when we're reading, and then see later why it leaped off the page.
Yeah, look, I think you're right, Monica. The the really interesting truth about life is that even with suffering, there's not necessarily here on earth the promise of the promised land, or
No.
that you'll come through it, and that you'll achieve, the focus is eternity, and that's sometimes a tough pill to swallow, because as an athlete, I think we tend to think in terms of, what we're willing to give to achieve, that greatness. When we watch the films of the Ronnie Colemans of the world, or the Kobe Bryants, and understand their work ethic, and okay, well, if you do this, then this will be the result.
Right.
And that, though that's true in many, many cases. I mean, those are the lessons we teach our children. But the reality of it is that that's not always the case. There's a lot of really good people that do really, really good things, that continually suffer, and that will never find the reward here on earth. And so when we're going through the gap, if you will, and you can't necessarily see through to the other side, recognizing that God is the focus. We're doing these things because we're trying to do the right thing, as you said, living as Christ-like as we can. However, our reward is not promised here.
Right.
It is promised in eternity. No matter how bad it gets here, our reward will absolutely be worth it in eternity. Mm-hmm. And I try to exercise my faith, my understanding. There are times that that conversation in your head is a lot harder than others. Mm-hmm. but it's real, and needs to be present every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I know that there's, for me, my faith has just been everything. And as I've gotten older, I'm 51 now, and it's like my prayer has always been that I have boldness in my speech and can bring people closer to the Lord whenever I talk, if that's if the hearts are open for that. So it sounds like that's probably where you are too. So I know that we'll filter this conversation with your faith, because it sounds like it's part of your life, and I appreciate that very much. So, okay, so you're living in the parking lot.
I just want to really, really quick, because this ties into the mini topic we said about faith, and then also what we continue to talk about with Chris living in the parking lot of McDonald's. Where you are, okay. The result that you are aiming for, being in this parking lot, shooting for your bodybuilding dreams, is not promised. So it's like to leap and hope that the net will appear, to me, is like, I mean, so many people play it safe and, live in their comfort zone. This is the ultimate example of like jumping and hoping the net appears out of your comfort zone. So rarely do I hear of a real true story where somebody actually leaps. I can say, I don't know if I have actually, I can convince myself all I want that I've, you know, leaped for a net to appear, but I don't know that I've ever like stepped so outside of my comfort zone. So there's no promise. If there's no promise for something to be there, I think it's hard for most people to wrap their head around putting their all into it. So that's where we are with your story. And I am at the edge of my seat.
I agree. I agree. It's well said. Very well said.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, Monica here. Just wanted to thank you so much for watching the Monica Brant Show, and don't forget to subscribe, like, share these videos, and oh yeah, and that little bell notification, don't forget to click that so you'll get more great content every time there's a show uploaded or a video or anything else. So you guys, thank you so much for your support, and as always, stay fit and love life.